Well, hello, everybody. If you landed here, you've landed on Let's Talk News, and I'm your host, Leticia Romero. And this is America's 250th birthday week. So I don't know how many people will join us here tonight. Hopefully, our regulars at least. But I thought that since everybody is talking about America, that I would do a little bit of a dive into whether or not America is still the free country that our founding fathers had envisioned when they created a revolution that created this country and developed a constitution and a Bill of Rights that gave Americans the supposed freedom to step away from government overreach and to find their pursuit of happiness. And that document that our founding fathers created is amazing because it grows, it moves, it turns, it even in this day and age, it applies itself. And it has survived 250 years and gone through some iterations because we've had amendments like the one we're going to talk about in a minute, the 16th Amendment. But think about it, something that was written 250 years ago is still governing us today. And that's just amazing. But the question is, when they left England and they left the king and they created that document, did they see America as a place where one group of people would be responsible for the care and nurturing of another group of people? Or did they see America as an opportunity for individuals to establish themselves and create something better and bigger? I wonder. You all have to tell me what you think in the comments. And boy, we have a lot of people here. Hi, Kevin Wall from the other side of the world, about the same side of the issues. And our good friend, Angela Ricca. Good to have you, sweetheart. Hi, Andrew Dorman. Happy Tuesday to you. Hi, Francine. Good to have you. Hi, Lucille. Hi, Kevin Young. It's good to have you too. And hi, Karen. I'm so glad you're watching. So, I mean, what do you think? Do you think that we are as free today in America as we were when our founding fathers created, told the king, "We're gone, George, gotta go"? I don't think we are. I think that we've had a slow march towards socialism, and it continues to this day, but now it's not a slow march. Now it is a sprint, and it concerns me greatly. And the interesting thing was the founding fathers, the one thing that they warned of was democracy, real democracy, right? True democracy. They created us as a constitutional republic and a representative government so that, yes, all people would have a voice through their representatives, but they warned about fascism. They warned about communism. They warned us right in the Declaration, right in those papers, right in the articles. They were very concerned about having a big melting pot, but being able to ensure that the melting pot, that George and other countries couldn't get their fingers in here through our immigration system and other ways to undo us. And they put in stopgaps, and they warned. They wrote a letter to the future and said, be careful. Be careful of socialism, communism, fascism, royalty, anything that would centralize control in one person, even if that person was the president of the United States. And what they did was they created Congress, the presidency, and the Supreme Court so that we would, that there would be stopgaps on that one would watch the other. So right now, I think that we're not that free. And I'm going to show you some pictures, and this is why we're not that free. This is Senator Furnifold Simmons and Representative Oscar Underwood, both Democrats from North Carolina and Alabama. Anybody want to venture a guess what they did to undermine freedom in America? Come on, take a guess. Anybody take a guess? They were the sponsors of the Revenue Act of 1913. Okay, and what the Revenue Act did, well, I'm not going to, basically what the Revenue Act did was it helped create the Internal Revenue Service and allowed for income tax to be collected by the federal government. And here is the president, Woodrow Wilson, that championed this. All right. Not only did he champion this came after something very significant, which was the 16th Amendment. I mean, the 16th Amendment, when you think about it, the state senates, basically we had a constitutional convention similar to what's going on right now, where they're trying to put term limits in place by having the states adopt under Article 5 a constitutional convention to amend the Constitution. And back in 1913, this happened. And it happened because Wilson wanted it to happen. So I'm going to let you listen to an explanation by better people than I.
The 16th Amendment to the Constitution gives Congress the power to establish and collect federal income taxes. It says, "The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes, from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states, and without regard to any census or enumeration." Prior to the 16th Amendment, which was ratified on February 3, 1913, the Supreme Court had held in Pollock v. Farmers Loan and Trust Company, 1895, that income tax was a direct tax. Article 1 of the Constitution requires that direct taxes be divided among the states according to population, or apportioned, regardless of how much that particular state had contributed to the tax itself. The 16th Amendment released the government from this apportionment requirement for income taxes. The 16th Amendment resulted in a big change in how the national government was funded. Prior to the amendment, the source of most of the national government's income was through taxes on goods and services. Today, individual federal income taxes make up slightly more than 50% of the national government's total income.
So slightly more than 50%. So they shifted the money away from tariffs, collecting, tariffs, and they shifted it directly to the worker. And they thought that it was going to, Wilson thought that it was going to be more equal. It would bring about equality, a word we've heard here many, many times. And of course, it was the Democrats that did it, because before the 16th Amendment and before the Revenue Act, we were funding the government through tariffs, through some other things. Let's see. I think I have. What do I have here? Okay, here it is. So the majority was, in 1935. We had estates and gifts, excise taxes, payroll taxes, corporate and income taxes, and then individual income taxes were the last. That was the least amount. But look at what happened as time went on. The income tax went way up, and payroll taxes. So you have income taxes and payroll taxes paying the most. Estates and gifts not paying very much at all. Excise taxes not paying very much at all. And corporate taxes, right, that we've heard about over and over again. Oh, the corporations. They're not. We're paying certainly more than in 1935, but certainly not as much as they were paying, let's say in 1940s, and certainly not more than is being paid by the individual income tax. So the burden is on the individual, is on the American to fund the government, which gives away our money to others. It's not like we fund the government and the government just builds roads and defenses and that's it, and keeps us safe, safety and security. Now we have Social Security, and that was under FDR that started. Social Security and disability, grants, all kinds of funding, federal funding that we really don't have say in. We supposedly have say in because our members of Congress are supposedly representing us when they're voting for these budgets. The problem is that our members of Congress spend more time being wined and dined by lobbyists than listening to the American people. And if you don't believe me, just take a look at what's going on with the Save America Act. 90% of Americans want it passed, and Congress can't pass it. It's crazy. It's crazy that we can't get the votes in the Senate for it. Why? This was, let's see, I have two of these. This was the very simple tax form in 1913 that was used to collect income taxes. And now, back then, we paid it in March. Let's see. Back then, we paid, the money was paid, let's see. So exemptions, the normal, let me just read this because I want to be precise. The last time that there was an income tax was Civil War era. In 1872. And then the Supreme Court struck it down in 1894. So normal tax was 1% on net income above exemptions. Exemptions for normal taxes was $3,000 for single individuals, $4,000 total for married couples living together, $3,000 plus $1,000 additional, no general dependent exemptions at first. And then the surtax was an additional progressive tax on individuals applied on top of the normal tax. So the surtax, let's just say, you had to be making in 1913 over $500,000 to be taxed at 7%. Between 0 and 20,000, there was zero surtax, and it was a combined 1%. But the first 4,000 for a family, 3,000 for an individual was exempt, and most people's salary was about that. So very, very few people actually paid that tax. Up to 50,000 was 2%. 50 to 75,000 was 3%. 75 to 100 was 4%. 100 to 250 was 5%. 250 to 500,000, 6%. And over 500,000 was 7%. The corporate tax was a flat tax of 1% on net income of nearly all corporations. And the prior exemption of $5,000 was repealed. So that's, that was how they presented it. So the majority of the people in the country were not upset because they knew they didn't have to pay anything. But let me just show you how Wilson got around this.
In hopes of further weakening the power of big business, Wilson worked diligently at convincing Congress to lower tariffs. In 1913, he called a special session of Congress to plead his case for significantly reducing tariffs for the first time since the Civil War. This meeting established the precedent of the President delivering the State of the Union address to Congress in person. Businesses were working hard at lobbying Congress as well. As the tariff debate consumed Washington, D.C., armies of lobbyists hired by corporations to persuade Congress descended on the Capitol. Wilson urged Americans to monitor the votes of their senators. In the end, the Revenue Act of 1913 was signed into law, and the bill, also known as the Underwood Act, is considered a major triumph for President Wilson. With tariff rates drastically lowered, the federal government had to find a way to replace the revenue. The 16th Amendment, ratified in 1913, legalized the use of an income tax. This new tax would generate funding for the federal government by taxing corporate profits and the individual earnings of U.S. citizens. By 1917, the federal government was receiving more revenue from the income tax than tariffs had ever brought in. Today, income and corporate taxes represent the bulk of the federal government's funding. With the income tax in place, Wilson focused his attention on financial reform. Wilson hoped to strengthen America's banking system and to find a way to control the amount of money in circulation. Wilson knew that the supply of money and the availability of credit needed to keep pace with the American economy. Wilson hoped to create a decentralized, private banking system that could be placed under federal control. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 created 12 districts across the U.S. and established a regional central bank for each district. These would serve as bankers' banks for each district. These reserve banks had the ability to issue paper currency during emergency situations, and member banks were granted the freedom to make loans with the money. Federal Reserve banks could also transfer money to member banks during a crisis in hopes of preventing banks from failing. The Federal Reserve System is seen as another major achievement of Wilson's presidency, and it remains in use today as the basis for controlling and maintaining America's banking system.
So Wilson, you should know, was revered for what he did with the American economy. Revered. And when he pushed the income tax, then other countries started doing that too. The problem is that the reason he wanted to stop big corporations and businesses is because we talked about this in the past, right? They had too much power, right? They had more money than the government and could do whatever they needed to do. And the wars were funded by these business owners. And many things were funded by these business owners, these high financiers, these wealthy Americans. Everything that we needed was basically funded by the government or the president going to these wealthy presidents of corporations or businessmen, mostly men, because at the time women couldn't own anything or even sign checks, and asking for money. And Wilson didn't like this. Wilson didn't like the fact that the president had to ask businessmen for money. So he wanted to create something that basically the president can control but pretend not to control, which was the Federal Reserve, right? We're supposed to be separate. But, Supreme Court recently said that, the president can get involved with the Federal Reserve because the president needs to work with the Federal Reserve. But they didn't like the way President Trump fired the governor of the Feds. So he's got to do something different. But I guess what I'm saying is that what Wilson did was he transferred the mega power from individual business owners to banks. And now the banks call the shots. So you didn't get rid of that powerful money situation. You just transferred it somewhere else where the president and the government could have more involvement with it. And when that happened, corruption occurred, because now you have elected officials, members of Congress and the Senate, right? Members of Congress, investing in the stock market based on information that they have on the legislation that they're going to pass. And they're all making millions. Power just shifted from individuals who did what they had to do to make money and power and wealth legacy. And Wilson took it from those individuals and their employees, basically, and said, okay, we're going to give it to this banking system. And we're going to give that power to the banking system and Congress. So are we free? And, oh, by the way, we're going to make everything even by having income taxes and payroll taxes and all these taxes, so that we don't have to beg. If we want to go to, if I'm the president, I want to go to war, I would have to raise the money to pay for the war by begging these business owners to give me money. That's how it worked in the past. That's why for the Civil War, Lincoln created the income tax, because he needed to fund the war, and he couldn't depend on the business owners to fund the war, because basically we were at war with the South, which were the business owners. Those were the merchants, that stated that if we took the slaves away, they couldn't do business in America. So he had no choice but to create that limited income tax, which the Supreme Court knocked down. And so Wilson, coming in, 20 years later, decided, okay, well, we're going to need an amendment. We're going to need to centralize the power in the presidency. We're going to need to take the money away from the businesses. We're going to need to make sure that the president has money at hand. And I don't think that anybody expected that our tax dollars would go to Uganda to pay for sex change operations. That's just a byproduct of corruption. And I don't think anybody thought that Somalia would be funded almost entirely from our American tax dollars. But that's what happens. It happens because the people in Congress get to make money. So the only people that really got fucked in this whole situation was the American people. Because yes, there were plenty of poor American people, at the turn of the century. It was, as manufacturing was going. I mean, there were, women who were abused. There were children that were working and abused. The factory workers, worked in terrible conditions, but they all had the opportunity to pick themselves up somehow, right? To do exactly what everybody else did, find a niche and create a business and flourish and employ other people. But once Wilson did what he did, taking a portion of people's taxes and mandating that the people had to, fund the government and not the tariffs. And oh, by the way, what they said is that the tariffs were driving the cost of things up. Okay, but the cost of things are the cost of things. But fortunately, everybody had a garden. Everybody could grow food. Well, I'm not going to say everybody. Everybody who had a piece of land could grow food. There were charities. There were opportunities for people to escape the yoke around their neck. Not anymore, because with the 16th Amendment and then the income tax, we are mandated as individuals to pay, on average, 15% of our salary to a bloated government that is mismanaging our money and wants. It's like the blob. It wants more and more and more power, more everything from us. And it wants us to have less rights. So, I started this by asking, is America free? Are Americans free? Not anymore. Not anymore. And that's why Trump is suing. And that's why Trump is doing what he's doing. Because we're not free. We're, business is, you saw it. I mean, 113 years ago, the same shit. Wilson was spewing the same shit as Pocahontas is spewing, and Bernie Sanders and AOC. Same shit. Just different, I mean, a century later and the same shit is being spewed. And that's concerning to me, because that's how you wind up with socialism. And the irony is that Wilson actually wrote, and I put a link at the top, he actually wrote a paper on socialism and democracy. He was very weary of democracy, as our founding fathers were. But he was the one that started the ball rolling towards socialism. He was thinking he was doing the right thing. I mean, I think everybody starts out thinking they're doing the right thing. And clearly it was the wrong thing, because we're in a bad situation right now, a really bad situation where socialism, and we've got some primaries going on now. Socialism was really taking hold in America because of affordability, and people think that they can't afford stuff. And it's true, they can't afford stuff. They can't afford stuff because we gave up being American a long time ago. We stopped making things. We stopped inventing things. We stopped creating things. We stopped making things. Okay, let's see. Gloria joined us. The professor joined us, and the professor says the powers that be. Tax was temporary. Nobody paid them. It became permanent. Everybody paid. Right, exactly. Today, 50 million don't pay. That's right. And think about that. There's 300 all right, now we'll say 50 million in the country because of illegal migrants. And 50 million don't pay. So, that's a good percentage of people. We're robbing Peter to pay Paul. The 50 million who don't pay vote Dem Socialist, of course. Hi, Mickey. How are you doing? I hope Mom is doing well. Margie told me she wasn't feeling well. New York City budget, 126 billion, was 89 billion when Bloomberg was mayor, and went up to 96 billion. So this is bloated government. All right, because all we're doing is we're just taking money from you and putting it over here and giving it to them, and somebody's got to make the decisions, and that's the problem. And Margaret Thatcher said that the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money, and that's so. But unfortunately, her country is hurtling towards it, and socialism, communism, it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing at the end of the day. And if you listen to the people in New York City talk, they all think that it's the greatest thing, socialism. So it's worth it for us to know this and to understand this. And we need to call our members of Congress, and we need to stop this. We need to reduce this income tax. We need to stop funding all these programs. We need the money to stay here. We need to mandate that, that the money can only go for certain things. And I don't know exactly how to do that. Maybe legislation, maybe a bill. And speaking of, before I go, I just want to say this. So the Supreme Court said that birthright citizenship, they upheld it. And Trump is pissed, and some of the Justice Alito was really pissed because this tourism citizenship is a problem, and it really is a problem. Nobody could have seen that coming. Our founding fathers could have never seen that coming. They couldn't have known we could travel, in a day around the world. But here's the thing. If they're going to be citizens, then their money should be taxed no matter where they are, right? Just like us. So if that's the case, let's all write notes to our Democrat Congress members and say that if you want to keep birthright citizenship, then we want them to be taxed. Okay, I'm going to leave you on that note. I'm going to see you tomorrow at 8:00. We're going to talk more about the Constitution in this country leading up to the 4th of July. Okay, love you all. Thank you so much for joining. See you tomorrow at 8.